All right, so welcome to another episode of Dimwits, Dipshots, Dufuses, and Dullards. This is episode 4, and I censor the that part of the title because if you're uploading to YouTube, they don't want you to have swear words within the first 2 minutes, so you have to be a little bit of a wimp as you record these things and strategically plan out where you're going to say something offensive or what have you. So anyway, who is our quadruple D of the week? This is somebody who matches the dimwit, dipshot, doofus, or dullard category, maybe sweeping all of those categories. While our choice, or my choice for this week, is yet again Benjamin Netanyahu, or BB as they call him, because I guess that's a way to make a monster seem a little bit more cute. Well, I do hesitate to call somebody a monster because, they are human beings after all, but at the end of the day, sometimes that saying, that particular word, actually kind of fits somebody. And so, why am I picking him this week? Didn't I just pick him recently? Well, yes, I did. But that was last year. It was in December, and technically it's a new year now. So You know, I could say it's like a fresh choice. And it's also a bit of an obvious choice because as we speak, it sounds like he's going to be looking for an excuse to break any sort of ceasefire agreement and not be the bigger man, you know, because when it comes to these sorts of things, sometimes you do have to be the bigger person. And it really looks like he's going to be looking for any excuse to sort of let the deal die so that the carnage can continue. But on January 15th, 2025, Israel and Hamas reached a tentative ceasefire agreement to conclude their 15-month conflict. And, this is according to all the major sources, including like BBC. The deal, mediated by the United States, Egypt, and Qatar, or Qatar as some people pronounce it. Maybe that's the proper pronunciation, but I've heard both. But anyway, it outlines a three-phase plan. There is an initial ceasefire and hostage exchange. Hamas will release 33 hostages, or at least they're supposed to, including women, children, and the elderly, in exchange for Israel freeing Palestinian prisoners. And this phase also includes a 6 week ceasefire and the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza, which never should have been denied entry in the first place. So things are looking like maybe they could be good, but we'll see. There's uh, following the initial phase, both parties will negotiate a permanent ceasefire. Hamas is expected to release remaining hostages, with Israel continuing to release Palestinian prisoners. That's sort of the main theme here. And the final phase includes Israel's complete withdrawal from Gaza and the commencement of reconstruction efforts under international supervision. Well, wouldn't that be something? And why would they need to reconstruct? Oh, it's because they wrecked pretty much everything: schools, hospitals, uh, any sort of cultural center has probably been demolished, uh, infrastructure, just about everything you could possibly imagine has been reduced to rubble. So I'm surprised that there was even an ability to reach a deal because, I mean, what is even left? You have to reconstruct pretty much everything at this point. And, despite the agreement, Benjamin Netanyahu accused Hamas of backtracking on certain terms, particularly regarding the list of Palestinian prisoners to be released. So he's getting all nitpicky about it. A sign that he's dragging his heels and that he might try to reverse course. He'll look for some excuse if possible. and Netanyahu stated that Hamas's new demands were unacceptable, leading to a delay in the Israeli cabinet's approval of the deal. So, you know, the same old bullcrap. And Hamas officials have denied the allegations. They've reaffirmed their commitment to the agreement, and this is what all of the major sources are saying. They emphasized that the ceasefire met all their conditions and accused Israel of attempting last minute blackmail. And U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, himself, in my opinion, a flawed figure, but anyway, he expressed confidence that the ceasefire would proceed as planned, acknowledging the challenges inherent in such negotiations, but emphasizing ongoing efforts to resolve outstanding issues. The urgency to finalize the agreement is, of course, heightened by the impending inauguration of U.S. President elect Donald Trump, Trumpo the Clown, who has issued stern warnings to Hamas regarding the release of hostages. Trump's administration has indicated that failure to adhere to the agreement could result in severe consequences. Well, what could be more severe than what they've already experienced, which is basically the near total destruction of, the entire area, you know, the entire Gaza Strip. So the conflict, which began in October 2023, well, conveniently it's said to have begun there, but of course, that this whole thing goes back way back. But anyway, if we're going to stick to the mainstream narrative, the present day conflict, the present phase began in October 2023 and resulted in significant casualties with, according to official estimates, nearly 46,000 Palestinians killed. But of course, the Lancet Medical Journal does estimate that it could be over 100,000 who have died, either directly killed or killed as consequence to the large scale destruction of the infrastructure. And, that's a major problem. You're not able to get a proper uh, count of fatalities because, well, it's hard to do that when you're surrounded by, chaos and uh, immense conflict and a genocidal campaign. The ongoing blockade has led to critical shortages in medical supplies and fuel in Gaza hospitals, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. Now, it actually didn't have to unfold that way. That was deliberately chosen. It's even stated that such things are part of the policy. There's a policy of deliberate starvation going on, starving the population. And, some people are actually defending that like it's a valid tactic. But of course, if any society imposes that on, let's say, you, are you going to be happy about it? No, of course not. Well, you might not survive it, for one thing. But if you do survive, you're sure not going to be happy about it. And in fact, get this, you're probably going to support any organization that appears to be helping you out. It kind of wouldn't even matter who it was, so long as they appear to be assisting you in any way, shape, or form. You're so vulnerable that you'll probably accept it regardless of who it is. And in this case, I suppose it would be Hamas, but put anybody in that general scenario, and well, they're going to start becoming buddy buddy with whoever would step up to the plate and do any sort of favors whatsoever. So, from my perspective, a lot of this has to do with the centralized power structures of both Israel and Hamas, contributing to the perpetuation of violence and oppression. I advocate for, dismantling illegitimate hierarchical systems that concentrate power and for the establishment of decentralized, self managed communities that would hopefully have plenty of measures that prevent such things from happening. So, in the present context of the Israel or the Israel, sorry, I mispronounced that, the Israel Hamas conflict, I would emphasize the need for grassroots, non hierarchical approaches to conflict resolution and societal organization, rejecting these state centric solutions that often disregard the autonomy and needs of local populations. The success of the ceasefire and subsequent phases will depend on the adherence of both parties to the agreed terms and the effective facilitation of humanitarian aid and reconstruction efforts. Now, of course, as much as I would like the reconstruction to be able to happen and for some actual, accountability, I'm skeptical. I think we all have reason to be skeptical. But the international community's role in supporting a sustainable peace and addressing the root causes of the conflict remains vital to the avoidance of future conflicts. And as far as I'm concerned, somebody like Mr. Netanyahu would potentially stand in the way of anything like that. So that's why I've chosen him again as the quadruple D. I almost said triple D. The quadruple D of the week. So as far as my next segment, the peripheral poop head of the week. Who have I chosen for that? That's somebody who's not necessarily gathering all of the main headlines, but who is sort of on the periphery, in the background, still making things happen. Well, sticking with the subject of Israel here, I've chosen Yoav Gallant, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's possible I'm not. But anyway, um, who is he? He was born on November 8th, 1958, in Jaffa, Israel. He's a prominent Israeli politician and former military officer, and his parents were Polish Jewish immigrants who arrived in Israel in 1948. Uh, his his mother was a Holocaust survivor, a nurse. She had been deported by the British to Hamburg after being on the SS Exodus as a child. Um, his father fought as a partisan against the Nazis in Ukraine and Belarus before serving uh, in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, notably participating in Operation Yoav, after which he named his son. In his youth, Gallant's family relocated, where he, you know, went to high school. He later earned a Bachelor of Arts in Business and Finance Management from the University of Haifa. Gallant's military career began in 1977 when he joined the Israel Defense Forces, or the IDF. Serving in the Israeli Navy, he rose through the ranks to become an officer in the Southern Command, playing significant roles in various military operations, including the 2006 Lebanon War and the Gaza War of 2008-2009. More evidence that, of course, this is an ongoing conflict that we're talking about. It's certainly not brand spanking new, although a lot of people like to put up a convenient cutoff point and say, "Oh, this is something that started in recent times." But no, it goes back. 2008, 2009. That was already. I mean, it's obviously not ancient history, but it's not totally new. It didn't just happen yesterday. In 2012, he retired from the IDF with the rank of Major General, transitioning to politics in 2015. Gallant joined the newly formed Kulanu Party. Following his election to the Knesset, he was appointed Minister of Construction, By the end of 2018, he switched allegiance to the Likud party and shortly thereafter assumed the role of Minister of Aliyah and Integration. So in 2020, he was appointed Minister of Education, and the following year, he took on the position of Minister of Defense. So think about that. Like, how no matter how much of an expert somebody is, it seems a little bit odd that they would be able to just sort of conveniently go from being related to education to suddenly being Minister of Defense. Like that to me kind of implies that these people don't necessarily have that much skills. They just are able to ladder climb. You know what I mean? Like they're not. It sounds like there's a bit of privilege involved at a certain point where just they're just like, oh, well, I'm I've proved myself in this area. I'm just going to randomly go over to this one, and who cares if there's somebody who might be a little better qualified or whatever. You know, I've already I've already been a party favorite in this position. Who cares? Let's just treat them as if it's a game of musical chairs, and I'll go over to this other one. But anyway, during his tenure as defense minister, Gallant was known for his hardline stance on so-called security issues. However, he occasionally clashed with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over some policy decisions. Notably, in May 2024, Gallant publicly opposed the idea of Israeli military governance in Gaza, urging Netanyahu to rule out such an option and instead seek international support for establishing an alternative to Hamas's rule. This public dissent highlighted the internal disagreements within the Israeli government regarding the future of Gaza. So, that's according to CNN, and I'm sure other sources would say the same thing. On November 5th, 2024, Netanyahu announced Gallant's dismissal from the position of defense minister, probably because of such disagreements, effective November 7th, and indicated his intention to appoint Israel Katz as his successor. Subsequently, on November 21st, 2024, the International Criminal Court, or the ICC, issued arrest warrants for Gallant, along with Netanyahu and Hamas leader Mohammed Deif. I don't know if I pronounced that one correctly. But anyway, the ICC alleged their involvement in war crimes and crimes against humanity during the Israel Hamas conflict. So, yes, that was why I'm including him in this in this list. So from my perspective, Gallant's career embodies the complexities of state power and military authority. His ascent from a military officer to a high-ranking political figure illustrates the intertwining of military and governmental structures, which I critique as mechanisms of centralized control and coercion, and militarization. Gallant's hardline security policies and involvement in military operations should be viewed as perpetuating state violence and oppression, particularly against Palestinians, though of course such power can and will be used against other groups that the state wants to target. His dismissal and subsequent ICC arrest warrant underscores the potential for state actors to actually face accountability on the international stage, though I might argue that such institutions as the ICC themselves are part of the systemic issues inherent in state centric power dynamics, and therefore will tend to fall short of whatever aims they claim to hold, as they nevertheless will tend to see these structures as basically inherently legitimate. Maybe there are a few bad apples, you know, similar to the arguments that people make about police departments when it comes to defending those. I mentioned Israel Katz, and he's sort of going to be my fetid fever dream flashback of the week. So, Israel Katz is a prominent Israeli politician, defense minister now, and member of the Likud party. He's faced criticism and controversy throughout his career, as one might suspect. The most significant scandal, other than his being a defense minister in a time such as this, but his most significant scandal, other than that, uh, would be involved in of corruption, particularly regarding his tenure as Minister of Transportation from 2009 to 2019. More corruption stuff going on here. The core accusations center on nepotism and favoritism in the allocation of public funds and contracts, as well as his ties to powerful interest groups such as the farmers' lobby. So, from what I understand, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the key scandals here is called the TAMA 38 project, TAMA 38, and that ties in with some transportation ministry allegations. So the most notable accusations include, again, according to what I have read, uh, that he's favoring allies, basically. There were allegations that Katz prioritized infrastructure projects that served his political allies or specific groups tied to Likud's voter base rather than projects based on merit or necessity. And there's also an alleged farmers' lobby influence. Katz, who comes from an agricultural background, was accused of advancing policies that disproportionately benefited agricultural collectives and farmers tied to his political circle. So, I don't know all the specifics of that. And if you want, you can correct me if I'm wrong about that. Or you can further elaborate on why those accusations are correct. But, it's one of the general accusation or things that he's been accused of. So there's also alleged mismanagement. Reports suggest inefficiencies and mismanagement within the Ministry of Transportation under his watch, with critics alleging a focus on self promotion rather than addressing systemic issues in Israel's transportation system. Now, again, I'm not an expert on this, but this kind of thing is pretty commonly alleged that people have ties to certain groups that they want to benefit. And Katz has not been convicted or formally charged, but apparently they were considering formal charges, but they dropped them because that's how things go a lot of the time. And more generally, such controversies or controversies, controversies, controversies tarnished his image and drew widespread criticism, particularly from opposition politicians and certain media outlets. So, from my standpoint, Katz's controversies could be viewed as a symptom of deeper systemic issues inherent to hierarchical, state driven governance and capitalism, of course. Basically, the idea is that centralized power breeds corruption. I I argue that state structures which concentrate power in the hands of a few inherently foster corruption pretty much by their very nature. Katz's ability to allegedly prioritize allies over public welfare reflects how centralized decision making allows for personal and political gain at the expense of societal needs. This scandal illustrates how political offices often serve as tools of reinforcing existing power dynamics rather than addressing communal or collective concerns. And, you got some good old fashioned economic exploitation and class interests thrown into the mix. Katz's alleged favoritism toward agricultural elites and Likud affiliated groups, aligns with critiques of the state as an enabler of economic exploitation. By directing resources to a privileged minority, such actions perpetuate inequality and reinforce the control of economic elites over public goods. The privileging of farmers' lobbies could be seen as protecting capitalist interests rather than addressing broader social needs such as equitable transportation solutions. And then, of course, you get into some critique of bureaucracy and state projects. There's a reason people often criticize large scale state projects, such as infrastructure developments, as being subject to inefficiency, political agendas, and environmental harm. Katz's alleged mismanagement and prioritization of optics over substance reflects such concerns. Instead of empowering local communities to decide their transportation needs, the state imposes top down solutions that may benefit a select few while marginalizing others. And, this also gets into propaganda and political self promotion. Katz's emphasis on self promotion, focusing on visible projects or decisions that boost his political image, exemplifies how state actors often prioritize their careers over genuine public service. I would argue this undermines collective decision making and fosters distrust in governance, which is ironic because that's, what politicians are supposed to want. So, what are the broader implications? I would frame Katz's controversies as part of the larger failings of a system that prioritizes hierarchy, competition, and wealth accumulation over horizontal organization, mutual aid, and equality. Instead of scandals being isolated incidents, they are seen as inevitable outcomes of power concentrated in state institutions. From this perspective, the solution lies in, either checking or balancing or totally dismantling such systems and replacing them with decentralized, community driven alternatives where resources and decisions are more directly, collectively managed. So basically, a lot of these types of people give us reasons to question the nature of so called representative democracy or any sort of power structure.